Hi there. Going to get started here with an older illustration I did of my dragon Figmund, and I'm prepping to do another illustration of him, and this isn't going to be the final illustration. This is a sketch. So I've set up 19 by 13 inches is my canvas in Procreate 300 dpi, and I'm just starting to work on a sketch of him looking downward, a little bit coyly. So not coyly like curled up like a snake, but coy, C-O-Y, a little bit mischievous, a little bit shy. And as I was illustrating this, I'm sorry for no hands, and you can't see the pen in this. In the future, I'm going to record these from above. But when I work on these, if I have a one-off character, I tend to use my imagination and any photo reference that might be relevant, right? Of scales or wings or horns or anything like that for a character like this dragon. But this is a guy that I'm going to be working with frequently in the future, and it's time for me to consider making a sculpture of him. It doesn't have to be all finished, but fairly detailed, and then once I make the sculpture, which I'll probably make out of Sculpey, just because I can bake it and harden it, and then it won't be as brittle or soft and could be damaged. I will be able to do turnarounds with it and have an idea of where, say, the jawline that has those red fronds coming off of it, those red points, where if I'm looking at him from a top view, where do those line up behind his eyes? It'll just give me a good point of reference for everything, as well as color. And then you can also use your models for lighting. If you want to put a harsh light on it, or if he's half in water, I could spritz it down with some water and then shine the light on it, or bring it out in the sun to see what sunlight might look like on his skin. And it just helps for my style to move him into a more realistic realm. My style is somewhat stylized realism. So I'm working on the horns up top. You're going to see I reduce the size quite a bit as I move through this piece. And I'm cautious in Procreate, because if you reduce the size and Procreate doesn't have great constraints on resizing of a portion of your image. And if you flick it 1 degree, a couple degrees off center, things have a tendency to pixelate. Obviously, if you make something small and then you click off of that tool and then you come back to enlarge it, that's going to pixelate as well, because you're taking something that's now been made small and trying to make it bigger, and it's like, hey, I don't have that information anymore. I should have thought about that. That's why I will frequently save elements of my progress in layers, even to the point where I will duplicate the file. And when I duplicate the file, if I need, I can go back to the old file and I can pluck and copy, and it's just nice to have that option to go back and find something that I didn't have before. Something to note in Procreate is if you close it out, like say you go to the gallery, you hit the gallery button and you close it out and then you open it up again, it's a fresh slate as far as undos go. So you want to make sure that what you save is what you're happy with. And that's one of the reasons why I save frequently in layers. I'll save the elements so that I have the option available to me. So here I'm going to shrink it down a little bit more. The horns aren't quite right. Again, a model would go a long way, right? Toward helping me to determine how things go, what the angles are, but we're just sketching here. Putting his neck in. We're just sketching, just playing. No perfection here. Just perfection in imperfection, perfection in concept. And, there's life in the sketch. And I don't just mean on the canvas. I mean, I feel alive when I sketch. I really enjoy it. It's just a rich time of development. It's almost some of the best time in any piece. Seems like those ears should go up that he has. Sketch those in on both sides. I'm sketching it in with the soft airbrush tool. When I work in Procreate, typically, I work with soft airbrush, or I'll work with the HB pencil or the 6B pencil. I rarely use anything else. I guess there is one charcoal that I use. But that's about it. Much of my painting, rendering painting, pushing pixels around, I do with the airbrush. Gives me a nice control over the flow and the coverage of color. And then I get in and I get into the details. Some pieces I get a little bit too detailed on, but it's kind of how I go. Kind of paint myself into a corner, so to speak, and then I've got to work it out. So I save that reference on a separate layer, of course. Then I can move it all around. I don't care if I pixelate the reference, because it's just a JPEG and I can do what I want to do. I kind of swing him around and see, is he supposed to angle left, angle right? But that head looking down seems to be a nice angle. It's a little hinky in between the bridge of his nose and his nostrils. It's a little too thin in there. I'll adjust that in a bit. But there's my soft airbrush. I work at varying opacities and brush sizes. And, I sometimes in my sketches I want to get some color in there. I want to feel this thing come to life. So I'll throw some color in, and using my reference photo, that'll help me to determine where the colors go. Not too worried about overspray, is what I would call it, back from my airbrush days. If I'm painting outside the lines, it doesn't matter. Get some of that chest color in now. Bring that blue around the shoulders. The likeness in my sketch isn't quite there yet. I think my eyes are too small. Not my eyes, but the dragon's. Some of you might think my eyes are too small. That's okay. Now bring some of that rich red into the ears. And there's that deep color inside the ears. I'll pop that in. And that deep set area around his eyes. There's a lot of blue in there. And I'll use that kind of ultramarine-ish blue to shade along the bridge of his nose as well. And then I'll add the scales in later. Now we'll play around with those wings. Boy, I never ever would have thought I would like wings like this, but there's something about them that they're not bat wings. I don't even know that they're natural. They wouldn't work in the natural world, but they seem to be a nice throwback for the character, throwback to a simpler time, and presuming he is a character with magical qualities, I think he'd be able to fly with those wings. Glide, soar. Maybe on an off day he'd plummet a bit, but I think he'd be okay. One of my biggest issues with drawing and painting is I always seem to make the image too large for my paper. I do that in product development as well. I'd start a sketch and then I'd be like, I gotta go off the page. But part of it for me is I don't know where the sketch is going. I don't know which way it's gonna grow. I mean, I might have an idea, but I don't try to overwhelm the page. So then I just would throw tape onto the pages and add more. I'd tape them from the back, so I wasn't having to draw over tape. And then just keep drawing. And then when that was done, I'd either, in the old days, I guess I could still do it, I'd transfer that to a larger piece of paper. Or, nowadays I'd scan it. Or I'd just take a photo, digital photo, and bring it in. You can see, right, I ran off the page with that his left wing. Oh well. I'll sort that out later. I think it was Tom Fluharty, who is a really incredible painter and caricaturist. I've seen him do that with his sketches. Here I am duplicating the reference image and kind of chopping off the excess around it so that I can bring that face up near the head of the dragon so that I can get into a little bit detail work. Probably jumping the gun here and going a little bit getting too far ahead of myself, but that's okay. If I was working with a client on this particular piece at this point, I might do one or two more sketches like this, with or without color, and I would send them on. And I would ask, are you happy with these? Is there any thoughts? Is there any of these that you prefer over the others? And that helps to keep us all on the same page. So now I have to imagine these eyebrows, how they would look a bit from above, right? I don't know how successful I am here, but I've got to consider his eyebrows. He's kind of got double eyelids, right? He's got that fold of skin over his eyelids that run directly over his eyeballs. And then I got to figure out how these teeth come out on this left side. I think he's symmetrical, so I think they'll come out on the other side as well, but I'll decide that in a little bit. Right now I got to work on this lip. and how it attaches to the jaw. I'd like to get that shape of the bridge of that nose in there. It's almost a giraffe-like quality to the bridge of his nose and the shape of his head. I think that helps make him look a little friendlier. I suppose the eyes really do it. You know, you're gonna capture the emotion of a character through its eyes. The eyes really are the windows to the soul, right? And you know, you can do a bait and switch too if you have a really mean character, and if you give them kind eyes, that makes the story interesting as opposed to obvious. I tend to prefer that approach because we live in a very challenging world, right? Where it's not so obvious by how somebody appears, whether they mean you well or they don't. So, you know, I'm working the eyes out. I'm kind of working out where he's looking. I don't know if there's going to be another character in this. But again, it's a sketch and a thought to get me somewhere. Get me closer to another illustration. I think the horns are they're a little bit too thin maybe at the base as well. I think they'd be wider. Working out the right side of his face and that lip. And now the pointed structure of his jaws. Yeah, I don't like that. Let me get rid of that and give it another go here. I don't know, maybe the first way I did it was better because I think it's pretty obvious that those spiky bits are further back than his eyes. I'm not getting it here. I guess in some ways too, because this is a whimsical illustration, it doesn't mean that I have to strictly adhere to his physical structure. I mean, there are times where a character can retain its likeness and spirit, and look different. Depends what you're trying to evoke. It depends what rules you set for yourself or your client sets for you. It was interesting. I remember reading about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and there were, I don't know how many animators there were working on him, particularly him, Roger Rabbit. But each one of them drew him a little bit differently, and you can see the differences. And the animators knew the other animators' styles so well that they could tell who had drawn that particular version of Roger Rabbit. I was speaking with an artist friend of mine last night on Messenger, and he was looking at some of my work. He was looking at a piece that was I shared with him that was maybe not my typical whimsical style, and he said, I can see you in there. I said, really? I think a lot of us artists have that issue, right? Where maybe we don't see our work as a unique footprint or fingerprint of how we work and the styles that we work in. And he said, yeah, I see it. I said, how do you see it? I know it's in there. I can't really see it. And he said, I see it in your line work. I see it in the way your lines are in there. That was pretty cool. So I got that little bump right on top of his head. I'm trying to place that properly because that's a cool feature for him. Thicken those horns up a bit. You know, horns are another really good reason to have a model of your character, because from all different angles, it's hard to imagine how something will spin or turn, or where its thicknesses and diminishing widths go. Going a little more opaquely with that base tone on his lower jaw and into his cheeks a little bit. Might have his face a little too slender. I like that blue. Let me get that in on the side of the mouth. Then it comes up a little bit along the side of the eyes. I got that blue in the eyes, along the side of the back of his upper mouth. Let's see, let's get in here a little bit more. Want to lay in some of these scales, and I tend to well, let me do this first here. Let me get some of the green, and I gotta add a little more room to the back of his skull. Gotta make some room for his brain, right? And then if I lay this green in a little more opaquely, I'll be able to make some of that scale pattern. Got his one ear is bigger than the other. I'll sort that out later. I gotta add this thickness to the back of those ears too. Show the eyes a little bit now. The whites of the eyes. Now you can see how I'm laying in the scale pattern on the bridge of the nose on the side of the mouth. And I'm roughly laying it in. I'm estimating it based off of the rendering reference next to the face I'm working on. Do a little bit more work here on his wings. Just give myself a little bit more body in them. Add those lumpy bumpies on his shoulder. Add some of the brown along his neck. Always adjusting, right? Always adjusting opacities, always adjusting. So I duplicated that. I'm shrinking it because I want to see his chest and his front legs, and kind of play around with what is his body going to look like. I'm going to erase a little bit around this image so that I can see what's going on behind him. Not the biggest deal, but let me get that darker blue. I think shoulders might be lower. Again, this is where a model might be helpful, not might, would be helpful. Considering the contrapposta of his position, it's a little whack what I got going on there right now. His chest would come out a little bit more, I think. His forearms get real wide. He doesn't really have a wrist. I think he's got a wrist in there. It's a little bit buried. Something I like about him too is that he looks approachable, but he also has strength to him. And he can use that if he needs to. He can protect himself, or he can protect others. I'm going to use some of that darker to shade the eyes a little bit. I guess it's a little purpley, periwinkly looking. It's a good magical color, right? Bridge of his nose should be a little thicker later. There's a little bit of that purple in his mouth. Maybe it should even be wider. I think his mouth comes up a little further back too. But I'll address that in the next round if I take this one further. You know, when you get sketches to a point where you may be best, to walk away from them for a while. I'm going to get this deeper red in here on his jaw and under his lip. You might be best to walk away because you'll be able to see it with fresh eyes in even a half an hour. But certainly, if you leave it overnight, there you go. That's the bridge of the nose coming out a little bit up by the eyes. Maybe a little bit more space between his brows on his forehead. Darker blue to work up the horns a bit. I'm going to do a little bit more work on this, but this is pretty much where I'm going to leave it for now. So this is a nice study of my dragon from a different vantage point. Looking down on his nose, on his head. He's looking down coyly over to his left. And it's a great way to use Procreate. Procreate is so simple. It's just such a great drawing pad to be able to carry with you that's full of amazing tools. So, yeah, there you have it. I encourage you to sketch and draw and paint and, draw your own dragons. Draw whatever it is you're working on. And I hope this was helpful. If it was, please pass it along to your friends. And I encourage you to subscribe, and I encourage you to watch The Breakthrough Creative, where I talk to artists about their careers, not just visual artists, all kinds of artists. And you'll be amazed at the crossovers that will be beneficial to you from one specific focus to the next. Like visual artists can learn from dancers, and musicians can learn from authors, because there is a common language between all of us. And thanks for being here. I may return with more on this guy, or I may begin something new. And let me know what you think. as well in the comments. Cheers. Have a great day.